Today we're doing two for the price of one. We are doing roasted bone broth so you can get all of that great collagen. It's going to be super easy and tasty. And we're doing the easiest and most wonderful gravy, and bonus, it's dairy free and it's a great way to enjoy your bone broth in a completely different way. Today on Chris Cookin' Nashville, two for the price of one, bone broth and bone broth gravy. All right, so today we are making bone broth. I'm gonna make the chicken version, but this same process will work for beef bones, pork bones, chicken bones, turkey bones, anything you want. But before we can make bone broth, I've gotta have some bones. So I'm gonna debone an entire chicken. I'm gonna link in the description box for you guys a video where I do another chicken this way and give you the details of how to do this. I'm also gonna link my turkey video where I deboned an entire turkey as well. You can use either one of those to get detailed instructions on how to debone your chicken or your turkey. Makes it super easy to cook and have an amazing meal, and it also gives you all those bones and connective tissues to get a high collagen, high mineral content bone broth. Let's get to deboning a chicken really quickly, and then I'll show you how we use those bones to make our bone broth. Now that our bones are on the tray and our chicken is fully deboned, we can go ahead and make our bone broth. I'm also going to dry brine the chicken. So let's get that salted and thrown into the refrigerator. Let's get those set up, and I'm going to show you how we make bone broth. So to turn this into bone broth, there's a couple of different things we can do. The first thing we need to do is make sure there's some kind of fat involved. That's just gonna help the heat begin to crisp up and roast the bones, the skin, and any of the other trimmings that weren't worth leaving with the regular chicken. I'm gonna use olive oil just for convenience, but you could use beef tallow, ghee, you could use a lard, you could use bacon grease, you can use coconut oil. It really doesn't matter. Whatever kind of oil, we're just going to put a light sprinkling drizzle over the top and a couple of pinches of salt. I'm gonna toss everything together, and this is gonna go into an oven at 475 degrees Fahrenheit for anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes, or until you get that nice roasted brown look that you want on your bones. You can roast them as dark or as light as you prefer to get different flavor profiles in your bone broth. I'm gonna roast them fairly dark, so let's get some oil on them. Let's put a pinch of salt on them to help draw out that moisture. Let's get these in the oven, and then we'll talk about the 3 different ways you can turn this into bone broth. We'll let our chicken dry brine, and we'll put together a meal with that amazing gravy when the bone broth is done. Now that the chicken bones are oiled up, let's go ahead and drop these in the oven, 475 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 to 60 minutes, or until they are as roasted as you like them, and then we can make bone broth. Here's the bones fresh out of the oven, roasted nice and brown. I have a cup of hot water we are going to pour onto the pan so we can get all of that stuff that is cooked onto the pan up into this to help flavor our broth. Once you have the water poured in there, use something metal to scrape all of those roasted juices off of the bottom of the pan. I'm going to use a pressure cooker to make my bone broth, but there's a couple of other things you can also do. The next best option compared to a pressure cooker, I would say, is a slow cooker or a crock pot for 18 to 24 hours. Ideally, put it on low if you're gonna go to bed, or if you have to leave the house, leave it on high the rest of the time, and watch the water level to make sure it doesn't boil too dry so you have enough liquid in there to continue cooking out that collagen and all of the minerals of the bones. One more alternative would be to use a stock pot, preferably with a lid, at least 12 hours on a simmer to a gentle boil. Ideally, you would want to do it even more, but that can be a little bit of a problem. So at the very least, 12 hours, but that does make it an all-day project. Ideally, the pressure cooker or the slow cooker would be an easier and more convenient way. If you're using the pressure cooker, we're going to do 3 to 4 hours. 4 hours is better, at least 2 is necessary, but you're gonna get a much better and more gelatinous bone broth by doing 3, even better, 4 hours on high pressure, and I'll show you how we finish it up. So I'm gonna get the bones in here, I'm gonna dump all of this liquid in with them as well, and we add just enough water to cover the bones. After that 3 to 4 hours time frame in the pressure cooker, we can turn it off and let out the steam. Once the pressure is released, we can go ahead and strain out our bone broth in a large bowl with some kind of a fine mesh wire strainer. So there is our bone broth. Now, if you want this to be a stronger, more concentrated broth, you can put this in a saucepan and bring it to a gentle simmer, and you can cook it down and reduce it by half or even more if you want a super concentrated broth. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it just the way it is. We're going to cook it into the gravy, which I'm gonna show you how to do in a minute, and we're gonna season it as necessary. You don't have to use any seasonings at all. Taste it for salt and use it just like this. That's totally fine. Or you can add some seasonings if you're a little bit looser with the things you incorporate in your diet that way. You can make this taste like a fantastic gravy. Let's go ahead and cook it down. Let's make some gravy and let's put it on that chicken we deboned. So I have 2 cups of bone broth here. I'm gonna cook this down about halfway as we make this. So we're gonna end up with somewhere around 1 cup of this gravy. So all we need for this is whatever bone broth you've made or whatever broth it is you want to use and unflavored gelatin. Now I have beef gelatin here. You can use the cheap gelatin from the store, the pork gelatin, that'll work just fine. Whatever kind of gelatin you want. This is going to be the secret. We're going to use the combination of the collagen and minerals cooked into this bone broth along with gelatin and then reducing the amount of liquid to create that gravy effect that we all love. Now the benefit of doing this is you can season this however you want. You don't have to season this at all. You can add dairy if you want, and you don't have to add any dairy whatsoever. It relies purely on the collagen in the bone broth and combining that with the gelatin here. Even if you're not using bone broth, if you just have homemade broth, you can just use a little extra gelatin and get the exact same effect. So I'm going to use 2 cups of this broth over a medium-high heat. I have a large flat skillet because I want to start cooking, evaporating that liquid off of the broth as quickly as possible. And that's easier to do when you have more surface area. So I'm going to put that in there, and for every cup of liquid, I'm going to use about 2 tablespoons of gelatin. It's not exact. If it doesn't seem to be thickening up, you can always add a little bit more. And if it seems to be getting way too thick, you can always add a little bit more liquid to it afterward. But I'm just gonna sprinkle the gelatin over the surface, and then I'm gonna grab a whisk and start cooking this down to reduce the amount of liquid until we have reduced it by about half and we get a nice thick gravy, and I'll show you what that looks like. Don't add salt until the very end so you don't end up accidentally making it too salty as you cook it down. So one of the things you're going to notice as this cooks down and as you get close to being done is the bubbles are going to start growing in size, and they're going to start looking a little bit more like a jelly texture because that gelatin and the collagen in the bone broth are starting to become more capable of overcoming the water content of your gravy. So when you start seeing the bubbles grow and look a little more glossy and a little more gelatinous, you know your gravy is just about done. So the gravy has thickened up. You saw the large sort of jelly looking bubbles that were starting to form on there, and you can see the gelatinous texture that this has as you're stirring it with a whisk. The gravy is ready to go. All we need is something to put it on, but before we go ahead and use it, we need to adjust the salt. We did not add any salt to it because we don't want it to get too salty as we end up cooking that extra liquid off of there, because it gets much more concentrated as you cook. So I'm going to taste it for salt, add that in, and when our chicken is done, it's time to serve our bone broth based, completely dairy free, carnivore friendly, and as seasoning free as you wish it to be gravy. The gravy is perfect. It's seasoned just right. It's ready to go over the chicken. I'm going to keep this on a low heat just to keep it warm, because as soon as this gets cold, it is going to turn into a solid chicken gravy flavored gummy. So we want to make sure to keep this warm and serve it right before dinner. For an extra silky finish to your gravy, a little tip is to add 1 teaspoon of butter for about every cup of gravy right before you get ready to pour this on whatever you're serving it on. So just throw that in there, whisk it in really well, and enjoy. Look at the beautiful chicken gravy. And that is the bone broth chicken gravy, totally dairy free and easy to do with as many or as few seasonings as you would like. You really excited about this one?
Yeah, love chicken. I love gravy. And I also love bone broth.
With all of the bone broth gravy and all the skin and those little connective bits that end up getting cooked up in the dark meat and that kind of stuff when you eat a chicken this way, this is a collagen packed meal. I mean, like power, power, power protein and collagen meal.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, go ahead and try it. See what you think.
Mmm. Hmm. That is delicious. Oh my gosh, it is seriously so good. Super well cooked. I love the crispy skin and everything on it. Your gravy, though, is the star of the show. It is so good. And it's not like overpowering like the flavor of the chicken. It just adds to it. It honestly just tastes like the best gravy I've ever had. Keto, carnivore, or standard American diet. You've made this gravy for me a couple of times. We actually served this at our Thanksgiving feast, huh? We did turkey gravy. I mean, it just gets better and better, though. The way that it's seasoned, the texture, the taste. Also, I'm all for like as much collagen as you can possibly get. I love that. So high protein, high collagen. I'm such a fan of this.
Bone broth is not a hard thing to make. Getting the bones is the hardest part. So what I would suggest you do is you can either debone a whole chicken like I did, and those links are down below for you guys of how to do that. If you don't want to have to go through all of that trouble just to get the bones out, and you don't necessarily have a whole chicken, you can buy things like chicken thigh on the bone, chicken drumsticks. These are really cheap things you can buy. You can do chicken wings and save the bones. So cook that kind of chicken, save your bones in a big bone bag. Dr. Barry talks about this. Throw it in your freezer, and then once Once the bone bag is full, you make bone broth. You take all of that, you stick it in the oven and roast it, even if it's already been cooked. Just roast it until it's super dark brown, the same way that I did. Throw it in your pressure cooker, your slow cooker, or even a stock pot, and make bone broth out of it and get all of that collagen, all of the minerals, all the good things, so that you can use it to make something like this gravy. And the actual making of the bone broth and making of the gravy, very simple and straightforward process. This is a fantastic way to get extra collagen and extra minerals in your diet. Enjoy the amazing flavor of it along the way.
I like how cost effective it is. Because I mean, you literally bought the whole chicken and you used every piece of it. I mean, that's pretty awesome. So like nothing went to waste. This is so good.
Yep. Well, guys, there you go. That is the bone broth recipe everyone has been asking for, which is really not a recipe. It's more of just a method because you can customize it. And then, of course, turning it into that dairy-free gravy that everybody has also been asking for. So I figured I'd give you a 2-for-1 and show you how to do both of them. I appreciate you guys watching. All of the links are going to be down below, including the videos where I show you how to debone poultry like this so that you can do this exact thing and have not just bone broth for gravy for that particular bird, but I've got a whole bunch of extra bone broth back here we're going to use for some more amazing recipes. All my other links are down below. I appreciate you guys and your support. Thank you to the members of the band, my Patreon and YouTube members. We appreciate you guys because without you, none of this would exist. If you guys are interested in joining, you can find those links down below as well. Thank you guys so much for being here. We love every single one of you. This is Chris Cooking Nashville, my beautiful wife, Ash Taylor. You guys eat your meat and your bone broth gravy. Love your life. We're going to see you in the kitchen for a whole bunch more recipes. And if you think this recipe is cool, you need to go check out this one right over here.
Why are you leaning on me?
This is what I do.
I'm eating my chicken.
Okay, you eat your chicken.
It's so good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's very good.
It's so tasty.
Yeah.